Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share if you can. The topic of discussion today is, could America destroy Russia and China at the same time without nuclear weapons? So I found this article at nationalinterest.org, which is a very pro-American website. They've released another article here as well. Russia and China go to war against America. Here's what could happen next. So I want to kind of go over these articles with you guys, and I'll give you my thoughts, and I'll also compare it with some Global Times articles as well. Before I start talking about this, I want to give you a brief about Russia and China and where things stand right now. So I'm going to start with this article here. Nixon's China sellout. Nixon's China opening had little regard to American allied troops in Vietnam. So these were the articles which are coming out. 1972 is the time when Richard Nixon went to China to visit Chairman Mao, and he signed a deal with China at the time. So at the time, what was happening was America was fighting with China in the Vietnam War, and there was a lot of bad blood between Americans and China. I think they also remember the Korean War, where thousands and thousands of American lives were lost because China got involved. And same with Vietnam, China got involved, and thousands of Americans' lives were lost. And at the time, America was still in Vietnam. So Richard Nixon, at the time, he was against the Vietnam War, and he was he started pulling his troops out of Vietnam. And part of this as well, he also went to China to visit Chairman Mao. And the reason he visited Chairman Mao, because America realized at the time that Russia was the real enemy, not Vietnam. And America wanted to focus all their might against the Cold War, which was happening with Russia. And this Cold War was escalating year by year. And Americans realized that if they focus all their energies on Vietnam, Russia would win the Cold War, because Russia was in the background, pretty much laughing at America, really. They were losing so much troops, so much money at the time. There was huge anti-war rallies going on in America. There was a huge, this was a war which was waged by the politicians, but the people did not want it. There was a famous time when Muhammad Ali was asked to go to Vietnam and he refused, so he got sent to jail. Things like that, really. I mean, there was a huge anti-war feeling going on in America, and the American people did not want the Vietnam War, and Americans were more scared of Russia than Vietnam at the time. So that was one of the thinkings behind why Richard Nixon went to China. So he went to China to kind of talk about Vietnam. Obviously, he wanted to kind of calm the situation there, and he also wanted China to be on American side. He promised the One China policy, which was, you can see here, in the case of United States, the One China policy was first stated in Shanghai in 1972. The United States acknowledges that Chinese on either side of the Taiwan Strait maintain that there is only one China and that Taiwan is part of China. The United States does not challenge that position. So can you see what the problem is? What America promised China at the time, and can you see what the problem is now? How, when you get all these politicians, you get all these Americans who are asking for America to go to war with China if they invade Taiwan, or if there is a blockade against Taiwan. When they agreed that Taiwan and China is one China, they should just leave, Chinese politics and Chinese internal affairs to China to deal with, not get involved and start complicating things, start lying, and most of all, America's breaking their word. From the One China policy, they have what have they done since then? They've been arming Taiwan. They've been, giving these pro-Taiwanese separatists, ammunition to break from China. They've been pushing for democracy in Taiwan. They've been getting themselves involved in Chinese affairs, and every day you hear stuff like, if China attacks Taiwan, we will attack China. And throughout the years, they call it the Taiwan crisis. I think there's been 3 or 4 Taiwanese crises where Taiwan has been taking steps to independence, and China has not liked it at all. And when China tries to act militarily, they usually get bumped right back by Americans, by Americans putting their ships right next to China and across the Taiwanese Strait to stop China from attacking or doing anything. So it wasn't until, as you know, China has been a very poor country, so they've not been able to do anything over the past few years. So things have changed now, obviously. China has become a lot more powerful. So anyway, I digress. So going back to Richard Nixon's reason when he went to 1972. So he signed this agreement, and at the time China was sided with America, and things were great between Chinese and American relations. China was added to the World Trade Organization as well as other organizations in the UN. So things were looking good. China's economy started shooting up, and things were looking very good. And it was a big thing with Nixon going there, agreeing with this with China, because what happened was that was one of the reasons why the Soviet Union crashed, because of China, and because the Soviet Union had to invest a lot militarily. They had to put a lot of troops across the Chinese border. They had to spend a lot more money, and because of China being an American side, the Soviet Union was completely surrounded. So they had to spend extra money along the borders of China for the troops and things like that. So that's one of the reasons the Soviet Union collapsed, because their spending in their military was just unsustainable, really. With the amount of money they were paying, The border between China and Russia is huge. So Russia had to invest a lot of money, while they did not before, against China on the Chinese borders, and Russia just couldn't handle it. The military, they were just completely surrounded by not only Europe but also by China, and you got America surrounding them, also countries like Japan, Korea. Russia was completely surrounded, and they just could not afford to pay military all across the borders. And with the Cold War going on between America and Russia investing huge sums of money on their military, the economy just crashed, and the Soviet Union just couldn't handle it, and obviously they just crashed literally overnight. So that's what happened, really. So since then, you've obviously got Russia, you've got the Eastern Bloc, and Russia has slowly starting to, develop militarily as well as economy. It's slowly starting to build up its economy from the huge crash that happened in the Soviet Union, and Russia, is, even though it's not, in terms of economy, it's not as good as it is against the West. It has been slowly building up over the years. And what's America and the West done to Russia, really? You got to look at how Russia's been treated by the West, and especially America and Europe. Russia, since the breakup of the Soviet Union, has done nothing, to the West, to the Americans, apart from Crimea. But I'm not going to discuss the Crimea situation now. But Russia has been humiliated time and time again by the Americans, by the Europeans. I can give you a big list of things that they've done over the years, but Russians have been made to look like the bad guys. I mean, you just have to look at Hollywood films, and the amount of Russian bad guys there are in Hollywood films. It's just unbelievable. I mean, there's more Russian bad guys than than any other race. I mean, give you an example, things like John Wick, first John Wick. You got the Russian bad guys. Over the years you had Rocky, with the Rocky 4, I believe, with the Russian, fighting the Russians, and I've not seen one Hollywood film where Russians are put in good light. There's so many Hollywood films. There's just Russian bad guys, Russian bad guys, Russian bad guys. And don't get me wrong, I love John Wick. I mean, I'm not having a go at John Wick here, but the first John Wick film was purely anti-Russian at the time. But anyway, Russians have been humiliated time and time again by the West, and so what's happened? I mean, Russia has been completely isolated by the West. Sanctions after sanctions been put against Russia, and Russia has been trying, to get into the European market, trying to get into the American market all these years, and just failing, completely failing, mainly because of sanctions and mainly because of the huge anti-Russian sentiment that was going on in America and the West, and they were just trying to isolate Russia, humiliate Russia, and that's what's been going on in the last 30-40 years. And so what's changed now? So I'll tell you what's changed. China has come into the picture. So I want to kind of talk about China and Russian friendship, really. As you know, with the trade war, and it all started from the Trump, really. I mean, before that, China and America and the West were getting along fine, and Huawei was added as part of 5G all around the world, including UK. And then Trump comes along and he starts this huge trade war, starts banning Chinese companies, Huawei especially, and they realize China's economy is very close to American, and pretty soon by 2030 they realized the Chinese economy would overtake American economy. So that's, obviously when you have number one power, and then you have a rising power which is, close to taking over the number one power. This is why Americans been they put China as the number one enemy. So they've been fighting China for the past, 3-4 years, trying to stop its rise, doing all sorts of dirty tactics like, banning companies, banning certain exports, banning high technology machinery. We're talking about Huawei, we're talking about semiconductors. So America's been, and especially the West, has been trying to stamp China's rise, and then you have all these organizations popping up discussing China. You have the Quad, you have the G7 discussing China and ways to stop China, and it's just become ridiculous, really. So what's happened? This has basically brought China and Russia back together. So can you see how it's become a huge twist, and things have gone on a different angle? Because if you think about the time when Richard Nixon went to China and completely was one of the reasons why the Soviet Union collapsed. But now things have gone on a completely different scale, and if you think about it, Russia has actually pushed this relationship more than what China wanted to. Russia has actually, managed to partner up with China at a time when China is at its most powerful, and it's a very, very amazing geopolitical victory, really, because if you think about it, China is on its way up, and it's coming to a time where China does not need the West. China does not need America. They're about to become number one economy of the world, and what Russia has done is a complete turnaround. So it's very similar to what Nixon had done in 1972. Russia has done now, where it has turned China completely away from the West. It has turned China completely away from America, and China doesn't, because of Russia. China does not need America. China does not need the European Union. And do you know why? Because what China needs is a lot of raw materials for his growing population, for his growing economy. It needs a lot of raw materials, needs agriculture, needs oil, needs gas. And who do you think would provide all of that? It will be provided by Russia, and Russia will provide China everything it needs. Russia has got huge amounts of raw materials, got huge amounts of oil, got huge amounts of gas, and Russia has been delivering all of that to China, and militarily they are working on things like this. For example, they're working on submarines together. They're working on airlines together. They're building a C291 with a partnership with Comac, and they're also doing a mission to the moon together. So these things, these alliances, will slowly build up trust between the two countries, build up an alliance. And pretty soon, the military alliance between China and Russia, could be huge and could be even bigger and better than what American and the West provides. So I'm going back to kind of this article here. Could America destroy Russia and China at the same time? They seem to think so. They seem to think yes, with NATO involved, and they seem to think that the war would happen mainly along the Pacific. It says that Russia lacks the ability to fight NATO in the North Atlantic, which is not true. I mean, Russia has become a lot more powerful now than it was a few years ago. And as you can see, bulk of American carriers, submarines, surface vessels will concentrate in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, fighting directly against China's A2, AT systems, sitting astride China's maritime transit lanes. So one thing these guys don't really understand is the partnership between Russia and China is huge. There have been, even though it's not publicly spoken about, there is a huge partnership going on, and they are swapping military know-hows, and they are because you got the best of both worlds joining forces. You have China's economy, but then you also got Russians' know-how. So Russians got the experience, they've got the knowledge when it comes to military, and their military, is pretty much on a par with American military. I mean, when you look at the fifth generation fighter jets, you got the anti-aircraft, you got the submarines, you got tanks, you got the intercontinental ballistic missiles, you got the hypersonic missiles. All of these combined, is pretty much on a par with the American military and the West military. And China is still lagging behind in military, but is catching up very quickly with some of the amazing Chinese military advances over the past few years. As you know, they're building a huge navy, and currently there are more ships in the Chinese navy than the American navy. Even though in terms of tonnage, American navy is still higher because they do have like 11 aircraft carriers, but China is slowly catching up, and their latest ships, which are coming out, are on a par with American destroyers. And China is building ships at a rate of 4-to-1, so 4 ships to Americans, 1 ship. So you can see how fast and how far China has come with its navy. But there have been other advances with China as well. The jet engines Jet engines are the most difficult piece of technology any country can do, and only America and Russia at the moment can produce amazing jet engines, but China is slowly catching up with this WS10, WS15, WS20 jet engines, and these are all kind of homemade jet engines. Producing your own jet engine means that you can pretty much make your own fifth generation fighters like this one. This is the FC-31, which is a stealth fighter, and this will compete with American F-35s, and you can see how sleek that is. And it's going to have all the latest avionics, radar technology, AI. It will be a very much toe-to-toe fighter with the F-35, and it will be made much cheaper than its counterpart. You've got the J-20 fighter as well, which has been on service and is currently on mass production. They have replaced the engine recently with the WS-15, and they've also equipped it with the latest missiles. And these missiles are called the PL-21, and the PL-21 is a long-range missile, which says it's comparable to the American AIM-260 and also the Russian R-37 missile. And what they're saying about this missile is actually the range of this missile is pretty much to be over 100 kilometers. So when you have a huge amount of J-20s flying around in the sky, and they all start firing these PL-21 long-range missiles, 9 times out of 10, these F-35s will not be able to handle stuff like that. A lot of these F-35s are not equipped with long-range missiles such as the PL-21 that China has. So in a battle, when you have an aircraft carrier carrying a limited amount of F-35s coming into China's borders, while China can deploy hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of JC-20s, J-20s, the FC-31s, and if they all start firing these long-range missiles, do you think the F-35s would have a chance? No way. They're not looking at things like that. There's other technologies as well China has, which is the DF-17, Dongfeng 17, and these are hypersonic missiles, and which American carriers do not have any defense against. So if any American carriers come in the Taiwanese Strait or along the Chinese borders, these pretty much will be able to take them out. And that Americans are very much panicking due to Chinese hypersonic weapons, as well as Russian hypersonic weapons as well. They currently do not have a defense against stuff like that. So aircraft carrier will be very, very vulnerable. So there's a lot of people not talking about these really. So I want to kind of also go back to kind of this article, and like I said, it says bulk of the Americans would concentrate in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Well, to be honest, a lot of the area in the Pacific would be covered by hypersonic weapons. So a lot of them would be kind of fish out of water. Another thing I've not mentioned is that Chinese radars are pretty much the best in the world, and you can see this new satellite system which China released. It's called the Baidu satellite, and that is China's version of GPS, and last year alone you can see how it covers the whole globe. And one of the things that America is very, very, especially American military, is very much depending on GPS data when it comes to missiles and shooting accurate missiles, from the Iraqi Gulf War to the two Gulf Wars. You can see how dependent Americans are on the GPS navigation system. So if China were to take out this GPS that America depends on, and America will be very, very vulnerable, and this Beidou satellite navigation system would be able to monitor and track any aircraft carriers coming towards China, and China would simply deploy a hypersonic missile or even 10 hypersonic missiles at the target, and throwing 10 hypersonic missiles at aircraft carriers is still going to be a lot cheaper than destroying the aircraft carrier in terms of cost. So if one costs say 100 grand missile, so if you throw 10, you're throwing basically millions pounds worth of missiles against billions of pounds of aircraft carriers, because you don't just have the aircraft carrier, you also have all the latest F-35 jets and all the equipment, so you're talking about tens of billions that Americans could lose if one of these missiles hit these aircraft carriers. So they're very, very they're basically open targets for countries that do have hypersonic missiles. So I want to kind of go back to kind of this global article, what Global Times has been saying between the Russian and the Chinese alliance. And what they're saying is an alliance between China and Russia right now, the West hasn't got a clue what it's doing. I'll read some of the articles to you guys. Hegemony is the lifeblood of the US. The US is still the world's most powerful country in terms of comprehensive strength, super dominance over the world. The problem with Washington is that it's too greedy. It demands for hegemony and far gone beyond its capabilities, and the US has fallen into an unprecedented sense of crisis and confusion. As such, the strength of the world's strongest country seems not to be enough for its demand, and a large deficit in mobilization capability appears. So what it's saying is, America is very greedy. It goes beyond its shores they've got over 500, 600, even 800 bases all over the world. US is going beyond its means to claim to carry on its number one in the world. So here, the first continuous development expanding strength of China will challenge the US overwhelming advantages. If China is bogged down or falls into chaos, the trend proves to be reversible, then Washington will have a sigh of relief to get assured. However, the common forecast of the world is that China will continue to develop, and it's a matter of time that China's economic aggregate exceeds that of the US. For some elites, China's rise is equivalent to geopolitical akin to the disintegration of the Soviet Union. So a lot of Americans have been hoping for China's demise over the past few years, but it's never been coming. There's a lot of hawks in America saying, oh, China will collapse, China will collapse. But China has not collapsed. China has been growing and growing at an enormous rate for the past few years. For the US to assume that China will one day collapse, it's not happening. So now they're panicking, really. Now that they see that China is not collapsing, they're starting to panic, and they think, they were hoping for China to destabilize like the old Soviet Union, but it's not happening, and they don't really have a plan or a strategy what to do from next, really. So he says that the US alliance system is not as useful as it appears to be, with some important allies responding to Washington ideology but reluctant to take real actions to support Washington in encircling China. As China market grows bigger and bigger, trade between US allies and China has been already surpassed between them. US and the tendency will further aggravate. Washington will find it more difficult to mobilize those allies and make self-sacrifice for common interest of the West. So what he's saying is that the US is having a hard time pulling all the allies together to counter China, because as China grows, a lot of these countries have China as a number one trade partner. So they have to kind of look at whether the economy is important or following blindly Americans, where you don't know what's going to happen 4 years' time when there's a change of president and they want to go on a different route like Trump, So there is a big question mark whether America can kind of grab all its allies. But obviously you do have certain very strong allies of America, which will always follow them. We're talking about UK and Australia especially, and Japan to a certain extent as well. So I mean, US does have very strong allies, but these allies, can Australia do anything to China? Can UK do anything to China? No. I mean, they're pretty much mice compared to China at the moment. They don't compare anything near Russia. You know, having the main and the third China-Russian strategic partnership of coordination may continue to deepen, so the countries will become real allies in confronting US hegemony. This will lead to more uncertainties in the US-China-Russia game. US efforts to hit allies have almost hit the ceiling. The unity is like the last few drops of water in a sponge, almost nothing left. It's believed that no US ally is willing to confront China and Russia simultaneously, as doing that is almost equivalent to strategic suicide. That's why Washington softened some of its rhetoric against China and Russia during the G7 meetings and had to make some ideological show to demonstrate the West shares hatred towards common enemies. There is still a lot of room for China-Russia cooperation. Our sponge has just been fully soaked with water. China and Russia could make more diplomatic coordination in opposing hegemony and take counteractions against US attempts to strengthen alliances. The two can also tap huge potential for economic complementary. In addition, the two countries have just begun in moving closer to each other militarily. If necessary, there could be a lot of cooperation that can cause shocks. So what he's saying in these two sentences is US attempts to rally allies is like a sponge, and it's just trying to squeeze the last few drops off that sponge. You know, there's not much US can do with its allies to counter China and especially Russia. And what he's also saying, you know, if China and Russia, as they get stronger and stronger, there really isn't much the West or America can do to squeeze Russia and China, and including sanctions, including, you know, militarily, they can't do anything, because sanctions-wise, China and Russia, you know, as their trade between themselves grows, there's not much they can do with sanctions, because Russia and China are trading with their own currency, the yuan. They also, you know, Russia's providing China with all its energy needs, raw materials. So China does not need anything from the West right now, you know, and China is growing, Russia is growing with the trade with China. You know, both countries are complementing each other, both countries are growing. In terms of military, both are amazingly strong. No country can kind of cope with that. And I also want to discuss how Russia and China's foreign policy are pretty much aligned. Both the countries are pretty much on a par with their foreign policies, and I'm pretty sure that Xi Jinping phones Putin almost weekly. Their foreign policy in the Middle East is pretty much the same. They're giving the same statements on the foreign press, for example, with Israel and Palestine, with regards to Ukraine, with regards to, you know, Taiwan, with regards to Japan, USA, and Europe. You know, pretty much whatever Russia is saying on the foreign press, China is saying as well, and vice versa. So that's one of the great things about this China-Russia relationship. You know, they are much on a equal footing. They see each other as equals, while the West sees Russia, you know, as a dog, and the West does not see China as equal. You know, it's quite disrespectful, it's quite humiliating for Russia as well as China. You know, the things that West and Americans and the Europeans are doing to China is very much humiliating China, humiliating Russia. For example, putting the Europeans and the Americans putting the sanctions on China for Xinjiang when there's no evidence, no nothing. Normally, you know, things like that need to go via the UN, but these countries are doing it unilaterally. You know, they're putting unilateral sanctions without going through a recognized body like the UN, international body. They're doing it purely for political gains, and things like that. That's why Russia and China, the great thing about them is they respect each other. They have very similar foreign policies. They have a lot of communication with each other, and they do things, especially with the UN and stuff. They try and do things correctly, and it's a great relationship. And this is the kind of relationship that Russia always wanted, China always wanted, but they never had. This map here. This is the Arctic Sea Route, Arctic Silk Road, and you can see how once global warming makes the world hotter and hotter, these ice caps along this route will start melting, providing a route for the northern access for Chinese goods to go into Europe. And one of the things China and Russia are cooperating on is the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. So you can see a lot of the trains going from Moscow. A lot of these countries Russia has very good relationships with, so they're also helping China build some of these roads and build some of these infrastructure, and also Russia's and China's they're gonna work together going across this northern sea route. So in terms of military as well, so you got all of this area covered by Russia's nuclear weapons. You got China's nuclear weapons covering all of this area. If there was ever a war in the Taiwan Strait, Russia would cover all of this area. They would keep Japan in check. They will keep Korea in check. These two countries will not dare to jump in the Taiwanese Strait, because if Russia is covering Korea and Japan, it would be absolute suicide for any of these countries to get involved with Taiwan if the time comes. So this allows China to concentrate on grabbing the Taiwanese island, and Russia would basically support this area. The South China Sea, all of these countries are becoming friendly with China, and as time goes on, as China becomes more and more powerful, it's within their interest for these South China Sea countries to be in line with China and not America. So what's America gonna do? So the only way America, if they wanted to save Taiwan, they would have to come through the Pacific, and they would have to come through, Australia would also come this way, which means, if any aircraft carriers come between this area, they'll be in range of China hypersonic missiles as well as Russian hypersonic missiles, and it would be too much of a risk for any of them to come anywhere near if there was a war in Taiwan. And I personally think there's not going to be a war. I personally think what China's going to do is blockade Taiwan, so they will stop any imports of oil or goods coming into Taiwan, and they will see that America is not going to come to help, and Taiwan will just surrender. Really, they will see that, basically, if China completely surrounds Taiwan with its ships, any missiles that goes from Taiwan into the mainland would be intercepted by all of these ships, and also they've got a lot of HQ-9 missiles along the Chinese borders as well. They will also intercept any missiles. They will have 5 or 6 aircraft carriers by 2025 or maybe even 2030. And also they will have all these latest 5th generation aircraft like J-20, FC-31 hovering around, all these ships hovering around. And they would have anti-submarine vessels. They would have ships, looking for Taiwanese submarines around this area. So they would basically completely blockade Taiwan, and Russia would also help blockade this area to stop Japanese or troops from Okinawa from joining. And also Russian and Chinese ships would kind of cover Guam area, so nothing comes from Guam. And it would be absolute suicide for US to start sending aircraft carriers across to help with Taiwan, because if they do, they will be well within range of hypersonic missiles, and they will be completely sunk out of the water. And one thing American public do not like is deaths. So when they see like these aircraft carriers being sunk and all these deaths coming back home in body bags, the American public will start doing the anti-war thing that they did in Vietnam again, and they will not like that, and they will pressure the government to pull out and not help Taiwan, and Taiwan will be left by its own, and eventually Taiwan, seeing the Americans not come to its aid, would just surrender, and that's how China would take back Taiwan without firing a single shot, and this is why Russia is very, very important to China's relationship with Russia. And what does Russia want in return? Obviously, it wants a lot of good trade with China. China provides Russia with economy. Also, Chinese can help Russia when it comes to Crimea. As you know, Crimea is a very around Ukraine area. If there's a war around the Ukraine area, or if there's a war around Crimea, China would be able to help. So it's a great partnership, really. You got the economical power, and you got the Russia, which has got the knowledge, and you got the raw material power, and you got the land power as well. So it's a great complement. And would any of these countries ever go back to the West or back with America? No, because there's just no trust left now. And if you look back in the One China policy, what did America promise? A few years later, they're arming Taiwan, they're pushing Taiwan for independence. Literally America's been stabbing China in the back. So would China ever go back to America? No. Look at how much America's been stabbing China in the back. And would Russia ever go back to America? No. Look what, over the years, what America's been doing to humiliate Russia. So Russia and China are very happy in their partnership. And we're looking at a new world order with both of them together, and hopefully it will bring about a lot of peace in the world, because having America does not bring peace in the world. Look what's happening around the world, and look what's happening in Palestine at the moment, and what's America doing? Being number one in the world, what's America doing in the Palestine situation? Nothing. They are supporting Israel. They just sold a lot of arms to Israel to bomb even more Palestine and kill more innocent children and women, and what's America doing? They're not even denouncing Israel's war crimes. Israel's blowing up journalists' buildings, and they're blowing up anyone they can find, really, and killing kids. And America has not once said anything, and they all just come to the support of Israel, saying Israel's got a right to defend itself. So Israel's the one with weapons and high-tech weapons. Palestinians they're fighting with stones and fireworks, and they throw a little rocket they made in the garden out in the sky. It hardly does any damage, and they call it Israeli. They call it Palestinian rockets. But these are not rockets that Israel has. It's not a fair fight when you have a fight in the street and someone throwing a stone at you, and then you pull out a gun and or a shotgun and shoot his head off. That's what it is. It's not a fair fight, and America's just with its stupid foreign policies, pretending to care about human rights when they don't give a shit about Muslims. They don't give a shit about human rights. When it comes to when it comes to Xinjiang, Uyghurs, Americans don't give a crap. They will always support what's in their interest. They don't give a shit about any race, any religion. It's all about America's interest. But anyway, I'm going to stop this now for today. I have talked a lot. Hopefully it was very good listening for you guys. So I'll chat to you guys soon. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and shout out any comments if you have any questions. See ya. Bye.